Hello guys, got a video today. Today I've just got some thoughts of the Battlefield 6 beta, kind of like a review, certain things I liked, areas of concern, sort of areas of like improvements I think, and then sort of like, just some like general observations of the game. Now I have put quite a good amount of time into this beta over across both weekends. I think a lot of people want to know, is Battlefield back is the question. And I think it could be, and we're going to start into this video. Generally, I think the beta was kind of solid. There is some good foundations here for a good game, and I would like to see how this game continues, as I do feel it has a lot of potential. It's not perfect, it has some problems, some concerns I'm sort of, quite disappointed about, and others just, kind of mixed or sort of different, just observations you could say. Then we get into that and I would like to talk about that. So just a few disclaimers, obviously it's a beta, so we're not going to get all the features that will be accessible at the full launch of the game, weapons, vehicles, attachments, maps, that sort of thing. I do feel what we have seen in the beta will be very close to, or like 99% to what we see at launch in terms of like game mechanics, how the game is, how it plays, except the odd sort of bug fix here and there and balance weapon tweaks here and there. And so, so pretty much we have seen Battlefield 6, everything except all features available at launch. So that's all I've got to go by. This is what I've experienced in the beta. And I'm quite happy to say I quite enjoyed it, a lot more than the previous Battlefield game, even at the beta stage of Battlefield 6 in comparison to, say, 2042, I would say it's in a way better state, which is great to see, and quite a relief, honestly. So I think I'm just going to split this video into three parts. First we go into the concerns or areas of improvement I think are needed. Then just sort of like general observations of the game, and then sort of finish off, we go into like the sort of stuff I really liked about Battlefield 6. Just things that I've noticed enough whilst playing to mention, like the worst or the best of the game. And I think to get started, we're going to go straight into the deep end. Things I wasn't too keen on, the areas of concern or areas that can be improved upon. Like I said before, there's some problems, and I think it's good to go in first and talk about the problems, because I think we all want this game to be really good. Right, so I think from my experience in the beta, I would say the footsteps in this game are quite poor, and I would say it's probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had in an FPS game for footsteps. It's non-existent. There have been times where I have been standing still, and people have just like run straight up to me and killed me, and I've I've literally been standing still. And yeah, it's the footsteps aren't great in this game. Another thing is sort of the TTK versus the time to death. You die very fast in this game, sort of one frame deaths. I would say from my experience is very noticeable. Obviously, the server's probably been doing a bit of stress testing. It's the beta. A lot of people trying to get in. A bit of networking issue there with the servers. I don't know. I was dying a lot around corners, consistently. Didn't feel great. It's not nice to feel. But yeah, I would say the TTK versus the time to death, very noticeable. You die very quick in this game. Shotguns, oh my god, shotguns, just a serious rebalance, or just remove them from the assault classes, like what's called the sling mechanic. And I think another the use of shotguns was more apparent because the primary weapon of the assault class didn't have a lot of ammo. So it was limited ammo, so people were being forced to use the shotguns even more. I would say from my perspective, I'd say just remove shotguns, just remove them. It wasn't fun to die from them. I'd say maybe just give the ammo, the assault class, just like one more clip, one more magazine. I'd say. By the end of the beta over 2 weekends, I was the shotgun deaths were really sort of like enjoyability factor. was really sort of going like plummeting. Every death was a shotgun, and it was like it was getting too much. And I'd like to see it just serious rebalance, or just remove it and have a complete rethink of how that assault class works. A sweet spot sniper. I'm not really sure why it's in the game. I'm not sure if it's trying to cater or to trying to attract like the Call of Duty crowd in, who are kind of used to the one-shot thing. I'm not sure. I kind of feel like the sniping in this game is kind of solid. Anyway, you know, you've got the one-shot headshot, two-shot body shot, but you've also got the sweet spot that can one-shot body. You know, I don't think it needs it in this game. I kind of feel like I think that just the core gameplay loop of the sweet spot sniper is just it's just generally worse, and I would say just less enjoyable. And I don't understand why they put it in the game. I think like I said, the sniping is kind of solid in this game. I just think it just makes the game worse, honestly, in my opinion. And it's not fun to die to, and I don't think it's very hard to use. You know, just body shotting. I think it's one of them. The sweet spot sniper mechanic. I think it's something that will get worse over time. I don't think it's a very skillful mechanic. And I think just die into it over and over and over again. You know, when I'm sort of shooting at people, getting headshots on people, but they've just body shotted me, it's like, you know, doesn't necessarily reward skill a lot of the time. And I'd just like to see it gone, honestly. Just get rid of it. I think sniping's good enough. Okay, so moving on to the next point, I think sort of movement. I have a sort of like movement / gunplay concern. How the two work together, let's say. Sort of how you take gunfights, and sort of like my concern is sort of the longevity of sort of playing this game. As someone who's played Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, you know, with very different contrasts of like movement tech, you could say. I played very well in both games, you know, and I had to sort of take gunfights and win gunfights with or without movement. And it's just a factor of, you know, which one I would rather take or I find more enjoyable. It is my concern. I would say this game is sort of very like defensive playstyle, very positional, angle holdy. Something I've noticed just in my own gameplay is when I sort of slow down the gameplay, I started doing a lot better. You know, sort of like stat wise. Myself, I'm quite like a player who likes to play angles and sort of positional play. I didn't really enjoy it that much in this game, although technically I was doing better. You know, if you sort of get caught out of position, there's sort of there's no outplay with the movement. You know, you just kind of die, so you can't really play too aggressive. So very sort of limited movement tools, quite sort of restrictive at times. And I feel like, you know, when you typically play Battlefield games, there are times to play aggressive, and there's time to play a bit more defensive, let's say. And it's something you do on the fly in the game. And I think, you know, just having just one way to play to do well isn't as enjoyable. You know, and that's my sort of concern for like the longevity of Battlefield 5. I think whether it just get boring after a while. I would just like to see a bit more movement in gunfights. That's my sort of concern for the longevity of Battlefield 6. And I would say, you know, as I got used to the movement through the second beta, you know, I was starting to perform and getting used to the movement, stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a factor of just enjoyability. I think with the movement, I think I would just enjoy it more. For me, I just wish there was a bit more for like 1vx situations, a bit more movement in regards to how the gunplay works and how the movement works. Because as in this game, you can't really jump in gunfights, so I'd like to have a little bit of a jump or something, you know what I mean? Yeah, so the movement was quite janky, and I'm very happy I left this video until after the 2 beta weekends, because there's a setting in this game which is not functioning correctly. So there's in previous Battlefield games I used double tap to slide, and I don't think the setting was working correctly, because I had it on but I was sliding with one tap, with one press of the button, so the setting wasn't working correctly. So like I said, this is why it's good to just wait and spend time with games, because the setting wasn't working correctly, and I was initially thinking that the movement was quite janky and, you know, stuff like that, but it's actually, I was getting sort of movement penalties because I was pressing the crouch button twice, but I was probably getting 2 inputs. to trying to do 2 crouches in short succession, or a slide, but I was doing 2 crouches once, so it was like I was getting movement penalties constantly, and it's why I'm happy I made this video sort of afterwards, after I've noticed it, because it's changed my sort of position on the sort of jankiness of the movement. And like I said, I don't hate the movement in this game. It's not a game-breaking thing. I just wish there was a bit more to use movement-wise, a bit more of a skill level, and you know, for myself, more enjoyable for the sort of longevity of the game. It's enough to mention it. That's why, you know, it's sort of my video. You know, it's enough to mention it, and you know, I just wish there was a bit more. It's not a huge thing for me. And there's like a lot of sight sway in gunfights. I think that's a bug. I definitely see something on Twitter saying, you know, sometimes you're in a gunfight and the sight just sort of jumps up a bit. I think that's a bug. I definitely see that somewhere. I wasn't really a fan of that, but you know, I'm quite happy to say that was a bug, and it probably won't be at launch, so I'm very happy about that. Yeah, sort of like moving or interacting on environment, like rocks, the mountain map, I can't, it's called Liberation Peak. Just getting stuck on everything, you know, and sort of stuttering on certain objects, and you know, your guns wobbling, and you know, just I'd like that to be cleaned up a bit. It's very janky. There were moments where I was getting stuck on things that were not there. So say if on certain buildings, if a building sort of collapsed, there's sort of how the movement, it looked like there was an object there, like the destructibility. Okay, so there's a problem with like the getting stuck on things that weren't there, and it's something to do with the destruction of buildings, where I was being prevented from moving, but there was obviously nothing there. You know, there's some sort of like interactivity there where it's not actually there, it's sort of been destroyed, but it was like it was still there, so you couldn't move on it, or you're getting stuck on it, and stuff like that. So I think it's sort of that needs to get cleaned up. I think there's a bug. I'm pretty sure there's a bug. I think some things like that would just get cleaned up over time, I'm pretty sure. Talking about the spawns real quick, the spawns are I'd say quite poor. The amount of times that I'd say it was better to sort of spawn in on your teammates if you could, because the spawn's a bit more consistent. When I was playing, I would sort of avoid from spawning on the flags, because the amount of times I spawned in on a flag and then just died instantly because I got spawned in front of a player or a tank or something like it. Was, yeah, they need to work on the spawns a bit, I think. A bit more safer spawns, I think, because there's a lot of times where, you know, I just died instantly just spawning on flags all the time. The incendiary like the incendiary launcher, the thermite launcher, I think it's called. Like, I can't see anything from my notes here, I haven't wrote it down. But just like when someone fires it, it just slows you down and stops you from moving. Just remove it. Just remove it. Get out of the game. It's not fun. It's not fun to be just spammed, you know, with that, and just not being able to move whilst on fire. And just get me out, man. Get me out. Just remove it. Just get out of the game. I was not a fan of that at all. Moving on quickly, those sort of instances of inconsistent damage numbers. So I was getting 107, 105, 120. I think it may be a bug, or maybe sort of my own error of reading damage numbers wrong. Like I said before, this is why it was good to spend another weekend before I made this video, because I actually tested this out, and I think it's just the way it's technically right, but it just the damage needs to be capped at 100. So essentially, when you say you had a bullet of, I don't know, does like 25 damage, you know, obviously that would be 4 bullets to kill 100 damage, but it was counted, you know, 5 bullets, so it'd be 125 damage, you know, for a bullet for a kill, let's say. But you know, you don't do 125 damage, so there's something how it just needs to be capped at 100 to say you got the kill, you know, I think, because it was initially quite confusing. I think, yeah, I just need to just be capped at 100. Settings menu in this game, so confusing. There's like menus. The settings menu in this game is really confusing. There are certain settings, like when you're trying to find your sensitivity, but there's no ADS sensitivity and there's no like uniform soldier aim, and you have to go into a different menu to change your ADS sense from your hipfire sense, and then but you can do it in other different areas of the setting. It's just like settings within settings, like of the same menu with it's not good. It's not good. It's so confusing. I would just say clean it up a bit. Just, you know, pretty much all the settings are there. You know, you just needs to clean it up and just make it less confusing. I'd say even go back to Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 and just, you know, their menus were just clean, very simple, clean, not confusing, you know. I'd say another thing in the settings menu is like when you leave a sub menu, it needs to stay into that category that you're in. Sometimes when you leave a menu, it would just go back to the top of the very first menu of the menu sort of thing. Say if you're in the graphic settings and you go into a sub menu of the graphic settings, you know, when you leave that sub menu, it doesn't take you out to the start of the full settings. It takes you to the start of the graphic settings, let's say. That's what I mean. Just little things like that, just quality of life, I think would just be just a godsend, because it just makes it even more confusing. Certain settings that weren't in the game that I would like to see in the game, there's no ADS FOV, although you could change it in-game in a config, but, you know, I really like saying in-game, honestly. I think a lot of players are quite used to it. ADS FOV off, ADS FOV on, people are used to it. I think people would really like that setting in the game, as well as weapon depth of field. Have that in a setting in-game. You know, you can do it as a config, but it's just, I think it's a little personal preference thing, just quality of life that I think players would just really sort of appreciate having that in the game. So moving on from the settings, I think there was sort of visibility issues at times. I wasn't really a fan of although it looked absolutely gorgeous on the maps, very good looking maps. I think there's just like random like smoke effects for immersion. Just lying about the map. It's really hard to see people. I would just say try and just take it down a bit. Just take the immersion down a bit. You know, I was running low settings, so I wasn't absolutely maxed out. But I'd say, you know, just for multiplayer games, you know, just tone it down a bit, just clean it up a bit. You know, it's not fun dying to people you can't see a lot of time. I would say talking about a visibility issue, you know, when sort of looking out of buildings, especially on the Cairo map, when you look out you can't see anything, it's just brightness. And then there's a lot of times of when you're sort of pushing into buildings. I would say the Brooklyn map, Empire State, is very guilty of this. It's just really dark in buildings, and very hard to see people. So when looking out of buildings versus looking in, there's a lot of visibility issues there. I just wish they just like just try and clean that up a bit. It'd be great. Getting shot by vehicles, there's this like sort of stuttering effect. I wasn't really a fan of that. It was like it's very janky, and it's like you're lagging or something. That wasn't fun. I think it must be a bug. So I found that in 2042 before. Players camping on the top of buildings. In the Cairo map, the mountain map, literally day one of the beta, early access, there were people up in the mountains and up on top of the buildings and stuff. From my understanding on Twitter, there was people talking about, you know, that's already been fixed internally, so great to see. You know, people shouldn't be up on buildings and, you know, in places they shouldn't be. Yeah, so that's good to see. There was no server browser in this beta build. I'm quite a fan, you know, I'm sort of used to a server browser, you know, playing game modes that I like, playing certain maps that I like. I think it's just a quality of life feature that, you know, people would really appreciate, I think, in Battlefield. And, you know, as a sort of longevity of the game, we go deeper into the game, I think a server browser really helps with just the player health sort of community of Battlefield. I think people really appreciate that. Moving on quickly, I'm sorry if I'm moving on, it's just, you know, just spamming bullet points of what I like, don't like. Sometimes they add up, sometimes they just be very random. I apologise for that. Okay, so whilst in gunfights, there's sort of like the camera effects or like the suppression effect, like if you ever sort of slowed down sort of footage and stuff like that, you cannot see anything. You cannot see anything. It's not fun. It's really not fun, you know. Just so I've just toned that down a bit, you know. After myself playing Battlefield 5 where there's no suppression like that, you know, I would just love to tone it down a bit, you know. Very good. I did detect a slight sort of stutter or input issue when sort of unlock effects happen. So say you unlock a scope for your weapon, there was a slight bit of a stutter or input issue there when that did happen. Also moving on, I think there's a recoil bug at the time. There is something I've noticed, and I'm very happy that other people noticed it on Twitter about this recoil bug, because some instances where you just get max spread and it's just like all your bullets just going everywhere. And I think it's something to do with how when you like slide on sort of terrain or objects and stuff like that, and when you ADS go to fire, you're technically getting the recoil of whilst you're in a slide, but you're not in a slide. And then when you slide, it sort of cancels it. I've seen a lot of clips on Twitter and stuff like that, so I'm very happy other people have noticed it. Yeah, so I think that's a recoil bug. Hopefully that's been spotted and sort of fixed towards sort of the launch of the game. Movement in buildings, in particular destroyed buildings, it kind of like it feels very janky how it sort of interacts with the destruction of what's the map? Iberian Offensive on the sea flag. You know, that building where it's just shotgun heaven. You know what I mean, when you're up on the second floor and you want to sort of jump down, or you're trying to get through places which have been destroyed. It's very janky and very stuttery of how movement sort of interacts with. I just wish that was just a bit more cleaned up a bit, just a bit more fluid, you know. Also talking about destruction and destroying buildings, the destruction of objectives. There's certain times on certain maps, like I mentioned, that Iberian Offensive. I'm not sure which flag it is. I'll try and leave some footage up for you. And you go onto objective and there's no cover. It is absolutely destroyed. So there's just no way that you could cap that flag solo, or you know, even if you have a lot of players there, you could cap it. But I think it gets a bit too much. The destruction's a bit too much there, and I'd like to see a bit, you know, just a bit more cover there, or at least some walls there, sort of just stay up, you know, because trying to cap a flag when it's just an empty void, you know, it's very hard. Something I've noticed while I was playing this game, it felt like, obviously we're sort of still learning the game, you know, from the beta. We're trying to learn. I was learning quite quickly how the game works, how the mechanics work, and I just feel like it would be good to have a spotted feature, like in Battlefield 5, where you get a little around the mini-map and it just says you are spotted. I think just something like that could really help players with understanding how the spotting works in this game. And you know, I'd like to see a feature like that. I think it'd be really cool. So there's some instances where I wasn't sure whether I was spotted or I wasn't spotted and stuff like that. A little bug out. Something else I noticed is the like player models like stuttering or shaking really fast. It's very funny. But when you're in a gunfight and they're like someone's shaking really heavily, it's kind of funny and very distracting. But obviously it's a bug. But yeah, hopefully they sort of just bring it up. That's why I mentioned the video. You know, just mention all the things that need to be fixed. You know, that sort of player model just stuttering and shaking. Destruction of objectives, leaves no cover. Yeah, I just mentioned that. I would say just have the ability to turn off crossplay on PC. I've had some very odd gunfights with controller players. More often than not, I get no footsteps with sort of like the crossplay players. I tend to lose fights, gunfights with sort of controller players, which I would never lose. I would never lose against PC players. Certain sort of like I'm sort of, I do quite like my accuracy. It's something I practice quite a lot. You know, say in Battlefield 5, I'm sort of getting like 40% accuracy with like SMGs, assault rifles, stuff like that. So I'm very an accurate player. And there were certain times where I like certain like hit reg, or there's very odd gunfights here in this game with then sort of crossplay opponents, let's say, because there were times where, you know, I was pretty much hitting 100% accuracy in these gunfights, and they're just standing still. You know, I'm sort of like moving, you know, it's very well positioned, very, you know, slight movement, you know, but I'll still be able to maintain like 100% accuracy on these players, and they're just like standing out in the open, and they just absolutely beam me and just win these gunfights. I think I'm watching, I did watch one Battlefield 6 video, it was a Jack Frags video, and he was testing sort of controller versus mouse and keyboard. So there is, controller players do have less recoil, and I think that is a lot to do with it, but it's not. I think there's some sort of like hit reg sort of networking issue here. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So I think there's just very odd gunfights with controller players, but even though they do have less recoil, it's sort of confirmed in this game. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just the typical gunfights don't make sense a lot of the time, and I think a lot of it is sort of like networking issues, I think, or like server side issues, and I don't know. It's just very odd gunfights, which I should be winning way more consistently is my point. The bug where you start jumping in the air off like certain ledges, although absolutely hilarious, I don't think it is a game mechanic. I have been sort of trying to get some clips with it, but the accuracy really suffers when you're flying through the air, like quite understandably so. But yeah, I think again, you know, I think on Twitter I see someone talking about that, and that's gonna be fixed at launch. So the spotting. Just going back to the sniping real quick. The spotting while sniping, when you like the sort of passive ability where you're in ADS and you just naturally spot people just because you're scoped in. I just think that's a bit way too easy. Way too easy. A bit tad unfair. Sort of tone it down a little. Maybe have like a cooldown with it, you know, so you don't spot everybody immediately. You know, you can only do one player every 5 seconds or something. I don't know, you know, something like that. I just think it's a bit too easy, I think. You know, I felt a bit dirty spotting players trying to rotate and they're trying to cap flags, and you know, all I did was just ADS and they're spotted. You know, they're spotted and they just die instantly. You know, I kind of fell for them, honestly. Like I mentioned before, you know, I used the double tap to slide setting. That setting was not working in the beta, so I was getting sort of like movement penalties and stuff like that. So I used that in Battlefield 5, the double tap to slide. It was sliding off one button press, so I was technically getting sort of multiple movement penalties because I was technically pressing, you know, I was pressing the slide button way too more than I needed to because the setting wasn't working, that sort of thing, like I mentioned earlier. The rush game mode, I was kind of a bit disappointed, honestly. I never had a chance to get on the attacking side. I can only go by my experience on defending, and I didn't really enjoy it. Yeah, the defending wasn't great on rush, and I didn't really enjoy it, and I just went back to conquest quite quickly, you know. Right, and I think that's everything for this. I think that's everything for areas of concern, or sort of areas of improvements or bugs that I notice, quite big bugs and stuff like that that can sort of impact gameplay, that sort of stuff. I think we're going to move on to just general observations that I've made whilst playing Battlefield 6. Just observations. So this whole like open weapon versus closed weapon debate, in my opinion, of playing both, I don't really. Maybe I'd say the closed weapon played a bit better. I really don't think it's an issue, honestly. It's you know, it's if they went closed weapon, I'd be happy. If they went open weapon, I'd be happy. Maybe closed weapon played a tiny bit better, but I don't think it's a big issue, honestly, to be talking about, truthfully. I would say, as an observation, you know, the gunplay is more enjoyable once you sort of upgraded your weapons and spec them out. And trust me, there's some absolute beamer builds in this game as well. You know, we look forward to making some videos on that at launch, and you know, get these beamer weapon builds and stuff. You know, Also, you know, another sort of, they're all observations that I made in this game. I say there's sort of like clear battle royale references in the gameplay. You know, when you sort of your kit, when you drop it, it drops a little bag, and then when you approach the bag, you sort of get like a weapon loadout pick. Maybe that's a sort of slight hint to how the battle royale will play out. Sort of like the sort of lootable weapons on the floor, you know, you'd get that sort of screen, stuff like that. Moving on quickly, just PC performance. I'd say generally it was running quite well. Say from, you know, I played nearly every day of the early access, all the betas. On my PC, I didn't get a single crash. So I'd say that's from a beta. I think that's really good. You know, I'm very happy with that. I would say it's quite intensive on your PC, this game, even on low settings. Very CPU heavy. I think AMD CPUs generally perform better in this game, so, you know, if you are going to upgrade your PC, I think a lot of people are going to be upgrading your PC. Myself, probably be looking for a GPU. I have a 7800 X3D, so it wasn't really doing anything in this game. So, you know, I was quite lucky that I've got quite a good, very good CPU. So, you know, I was sort of GPU bottleneck the entire time from my experience, and yeah. And it'd be, you know, I've been doing a lot of benchmarks in this game, so it'd be very interesting to see if there are any gains at launch. If there is a difference, I would say likely. I would suspect maybe there'd be 5 to 10 FPS more. I would say. I think that's quite likely. I would say, and just, you know, like when I'm sort of testing PC performance, I test on sort of my weaker. I do have a laptop. It's relatively weak. It has a 2060 and a 8750H CPU, and that, I would say, although, you know, it's very high CPU, very high GPU usage, I was roughly getting about 70 to 80 FPS at 1080p low, which I would say was a lot more FPS than 2042 I'm testing on that on my laptop. So I'd say generally this beta is running quite well, although it is quite intensive. But I think, you know, that's nothing new for Battlefield games. Battlefield games are always, you know, generally quite intensive. But I would say just the stability of the game, I'd say, was a lot better than sort of previous titles, you know, 2042. Something else to quickly mention, I would like to see like a reticle sight color, like being able to change. I think the sights in this game are quite hard to see, and, you know, I'd like to be able to just change the red dot to green, to blue, you know, whatever color you'd want, you know. That'd just be a godsend. Just quality of life issue, I think, would be fantastic. Talking about the test range real quick, it would be nice to have some sort of like moving targets at the player's running speed. So, you know, so just like moving left to right, you know, just go up to the counter area, you can press a button and it just starts moving left to right, and, you know, up and further back, and, you know, that sort of thing. I think it'd be just nice to have that, just to be able to warm up, and, you know, before you get into game, and I think that'd be quite a good sort of quality of life thing, honestly. Okay, so, you know, as I say, these are just observations. Teamwork, I say teamwork in a typical server is very sort of typical of a Battlefield game. I would say it's no different from any previous game, honestly. You know, you might get a revive here and there, you might get some ammo here and there. I would say I tend to run support more because you have health and ammo, and just being able to be self-sustainable really sort of, you know, helps you out a lot. And, you know, playing solo is quite hard, or again, you know, no different from any other game, but, you know, it's a new game, so with new mechanics, so at first, you know, it appears quite harder. It will sort of get easier over time, and just from my own experience, by the second weekend, you know, I was holding my own against a lot of players, more so than the first weekend. And like I said, you know, when I sort of ran support, it was a lot easier time, you know, just being able to self-sustainable, because, you know, not everyone's you know, everyone plays at different skill levels, and a lot of general awareness of players, you know, they really pick up on certain situations where you might need health, you might need ammo, you know. It's no different from any other Battlefield title, I would say. something else I noticed in playing this game is like really be aware of your health level. You know, make sure you have enough before like rotating or taking gunfights. It's really important. You know, just from watching my own footage, you know, taking gunfights with low health means insta death. You know, getting one framed. You know, so really, you've got to really be careful with your health in this game and monitor your health where that is. You know, get used to that. I would say, you know, I was getting a lot of sort of like server icons through the beta. A little sort of round circle with like a cross on it. I would say, you know, obviously it's a beta, so there's quite a lot of people playing, so, you know, they're probably stress testing the servers and, you know, getting a lot of people in. They're probably under a lot of strain, so I think that could be the issue there. I suspect that's the issue, so I think that will probably get better over time and as the game goes on in its life, I think. Hopefully anyway, touch wood. Like I said previously at the start of the video, you know, we're not going to see all the features, everything that's accessible at launch. You know, we're going to get a sneak peek in this beta of certain things in this game, and, you know, there wasn't any spectator mode. You know, I think it's a very underrated, and people don't talk about this enough. Videos and Twitter, I think it would be really good to have spectator mode in this game. Such a useful tool. For a variety of different reasons, and I'd really love to see a spectator mode in this game, detecting cheaters, you know, just for content creation. You know, you have a competitive side to Battlefield that, you know, people like to stream and use the spectator mode. I think it's important. I think I'd really like to see a spectator mode in this game at launch. Thank you. People don't talk about it enough, and here I am. Give my take. I think just observation of the maps, I would say Siege of Cairo sort of had like a Black Hawk Down sort of vibe to it. I thought it was pretty cool, and it is my favourite map. I'd say Siege of Cairo was my favourite, or my go-to map that I really enjoyed playing. Maybe Iberian Offensive second. I think that sort of map grew on me as I was sort of playing, as I knew how to rotate and stuff like that. It sort of grew on me. Empire State, the Brooklyn map, I thought it was okay. It's got a lot of sort of verticality problems, and I think generally you want to have the height verticality issue on your side, on your favour, you know, if you can, and you have a better time generally on that map. I'd say Liberation Peak, although I would say it's kind of a solid map. It's probably my least favourite out of the four in the beta. A lot of my time was in Conquest. A lot of snipers, a lot of sweet spotting. Yeah, I would say, you know, probably my least favourite map, but you can still have some. I had some good games on there and some good moments. I'll probably have some footage. It's like a 29, 40 kill streak, something like that on that game with LMG. So I may, you know, you might see a bit of that at some point. Right, so that's done with all the observations of the game. I'm going to go into what I liked about Battlefield 6, things that I liked about it and I thought were really cool. The first thing is the audio. The audio in this game really has that Battlefield feeling. It's something I noticed when I first started playing Battlefield in Bad Company, I think was my first entry into the series, and it's something I noticed immediately. It's just like the audio of like tanks going by, the bullets being fired in the distance, and you're just like, oh my god, this is amazing. I definitely had that feel with this game, that sort of Battlefield feeling, the core memory that I remember of just playing Battlefield Bad Company, and I really liked it. I would say the maps in this game just look absolutely gorgeous, even on like low settings. You know, you sort of turn the HUD off and, you know, get some screenshots for thumbnails and stuff like that. They're really good looking maps, do you know what I mean? Really gorgeous. I was really enjoying the sort of Conquest smaller maps, infantry maps, like 1 or 2 tanks on the map. I really enjoyed that as, you know, as an infantry player. I really like that. Even, you know, Liberation Peak, like I said before, is probably one of my least favourite maps. You know, it wasn't that bad. You know, it wasn't too bad, honestly. And generally, I would take Liberation Peak over Panzerstorm or Armada every day of the week, do you know what I mean? What else did I like? I liked this might be very random. I like going through doors. Like this, the animation of going through doors is very smooth, very fluid, and you know, just thought that was really cool. I'd say the animations are more fluid, like climbing animations, and although there's certain times you get stuck on things, but I think it's not really an animation issue. I think it's just how the movement reacts to objects around the world. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but I think generally the animations are more fluid, and you know, they're really good. I quite enjoyed them. I love the defib in the support class. You know, great fun. Just quickly revive players on the fly in the middle of gunfights, and if they're behind cover. It's a godsend after playing Battlefield 5, where you know you can't always revive people in Battlefield 5, and you know, just having the defib, just boom, just get people up and going again. I really enjoyed it. I'd say on the first weekend, my favourite class was the engineer, with the SMG using hipfire specialization, so RPG and snipers on the conquest map, Liberation Peak. You know, just one shot in them. It was really good fun. I really enjoyed just running gunner. So in the engineer class, you know, just running gunner on tanks, being a gunner, you know, sort of repairing the tank, jumping out, throwing a smoke, repairing the tank, you know, keeping the tank going. I had some really good games with just some random tankers, and I was a gunner jumping out, sort of healing them, getting them going. We were getting pushed by 4 or 5 people. They were killing, I was killing, you know, I'd jump back in, quickly kill them before they can use their RPGs, and I really enjoyed that, honestly. I thought that was really cool. You know, I hold my hands up, I'm not a vehicle expert in Battlefield, you know, I'm very much an infantryman. But I quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed doing that, the tank gunner gameplay. I think it'd be really fun to sort of, you know, with your friends or whatever, just getting in a tank and just seeing how... I think you get some really good games and really sort of good teamwork there going, I think. And talking about tanks really quickly, I think killing tanks is very satisfying in this game, because they one-shot you, mentioned. I mean, they absolutely one-frame you. And when you do actually kill them, it's a very nice feeling, very satisfying, you know, to get a little kill feed come up and, you know, actually killing a tank. Very good. I think, you know, generally on the maps I experienced, because they're all sort of smaller infantry maps, you know, they only have 1 or 2 tanks. I think it played quite well, infantry versus tank. The tankers had to play... you could get outnumbered. If you're a tanker, you could get outnumbered very quick, and you can die very quickly if you're not aware of your surroundings, you know. So a bit of teamwork there on the tank. So I think generally it was okay. Like I said, I'm not a vehicle player. I don't know. There's probably some criticism I'm missing here, but as an infantryman, I quite like the way it interacts with them. They're very, you know, it's like how do you balance tanks versus infantry? It's very hard. They do kill you very quickly, but when you do get them, it's very satisfying. Moving on quickly. The setting in game is turning off anti-aliasing. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. Having it at like an actual setting in game to be able to turn off anti-aliasing. Oh, it's so good, and it just looks so much cleaner without the anti-aliasing. It just looks sharper. Obviously, you get little jagged edges here, but I'm perfectly fine with it. It's just the visibility looks so much better with anti-aliasing off, and if you haven't turned it off for launch, please do turn it off for launch, because the game looks way better. What else do I like? I like the test range. I thought it was great. Testing out your weapon, jumping into the test range, jumping back out, tweak your weapon, jump back in. Just being able to do that on the fly is just great. Like I mentioned, the test range earlier, just being able to have the targets just going left to right at the running speed of players in this map, so you can just get warmed up a bit and, you know, practice your tracking and, you know, all that sort of stuff, so they're not just static. Static thing would be a very nice feature. Also, something else, being able to change like settings, being able to go into settings whilst in the test range would be absolutely fantastic. Please put that in the game, because it would be absolute godsend. Quality of life would be great. Another thing I really liked in this game is the dragging of downed player mechanic. I really like it. I think it's really good, and I think this would be a classic for players that want in future iterations of Battlefields. I think this would be a popular feature, I think, going into the future of Battlefield, and I think it's really cool. One tiny little detail that I did notice, and I'm not sure if you have noticed, but a sort of little blood trail that is left when you're sort of dragging your teammate. That's really cool. That's really cool. Nice little detail there. The squad revive, the buddy revive, they call it in Battlefield 5 returns. So if you're a squad down, you can go revive them. It is in the dragging mechanic. You just hold use it E on PC, and you can drag them behind cover. Great, fantastic. Something else I liked is the damage log. So in the bottom when you die, you have a damage log in the bottom right corner, where you can see, the damage that you have received, where you were shot from on the arm, were you shot in the arm, were you shot in the head, were you shot, in the body, the location of where you receive the damage. I think it's very good stuff. I like it. I'm pleased to say there's no attrition in this game from Battlefield 5. It's very punishing mechanic. Just being able to regen health with or without medic, it's just such a godsend, and I'm so pleased there's no attrition in, because it was very punishing for good players, let's say. I would say just something I've noticed in the maps generally, except for the glitches you've got on top of the buildings and stuff like that, that's a bug, they're getting patched, whatever. But I'd say there's not a lot of verticality in these maps, and it just plays so much better. You can see the difference between like Cairo and the Empire State Brooklyn map. Just less verticality is better, which is why I think Cairo is a better map than Empire State. It's just not nice being able to. It's just a predictability where players are, how to read the game, readability, predictability. Less verticality is just more enjoyable. A Cairo map, for example, it does have verticality, but it's not as much. Do you know what I mean? I like the setting of certain streamer options. I think it's personal preference to like streamers and YouTubers, content creators. Just to be able to be hidden if you want. Be hidden, your name to be hidden, so people don't necessarily know. I think it's very useful. For all type of different reasons, stream snipers, cheaters that follow you about. Just from my own experience in playing Battlefield 5, just the stream sniping, the cheaters that follow you about, players that follow you about, it's nice to have an option like that, and a lot really helps with sort of dealing with that sort of stuff. And even if there's use case scenarios for just playing normally. If you don't want people to know who you are, just turn it on. Enjoy yourself, good to go. I think it's great. I'm very pleased to say that there is a scoreboard in Battlefield 6. We're very happy. I'm very happy. It's simple. You can see how many kills you got. It's got your ping on it. The only thing I would like to see is just maybe have is being able to see your level, like the player level, like level 20, level 500. That's the only minor criticism, but it does the job, the scoreboard, good. And actually also being able to see the whole scoreboard in one image. So when you press tab, you can just see all 32 players instead of having to scroll down using mouse 2, I think, and then you have to scroll down. Just smallen it and make it be able to be visible. All 32 players. Get switching returns. So in previous titles, in Battlefield 1, I think was the last time that it was in. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember 2042. It's been a while since I played 2042, but kit switching returns. Very happy about. Sometimes you run out of ammo. You can just quickly pick up another person's build. Whatever weapon they were using, use that. There's sometimes when I've picked up certain people's weapons and they've got some fantastic weapon builds on there, and I'm like, oh my god, what is that? And then just start frying people. And like I mentioned before, there's some beamer builds in this. Just being able to kit switch, I think it's really good. I'm very happy to see it returned. Also, something else, going back to reviving. When a teammate is reviving, or they're in a dragging animation, you can just go up with a defib, so you can just revive them to help that teammate out. So rather than them being locked in an animation of reviving a teammate, you can just revive them on the fly with your defibs to help them out so they can get on with the game. Do you know what I mean? Which I quite like. I'm pleased to say that the mouse input works in this game. Thank God the mouse input works. Thank you. I've measured it and measured it and measured it countless times, getting consistent measurements, and it's good. I would say as time went on, I kind of got used to the game and enjoyed the game more, which is a good feeling. You know, you get used to the maps, you get really used to the gunplay, the readability. I would say on that Empire State, the more time I played on that, because I think it's quite a hard map to play, that Empire State. The more time I spent on it, the better I was playing, the more flanks I got, the more kills I got, and you know, as time went on, you get better at the game and you enjoy it more, and I think that's a great feeling. That's a good feeling. Like I mentioned before, the damage numbers on the def cam with the body part location damage. Something I didn't mention earlier is it's good for identifying cheaters. Now, from my experience like I said, I played every early access first weekend and the second weekend, so I played like 8 days. I was playing quite consistently. I'd say every sort of free time moment I had, I was, you know, when I wasn't making videos, I was playing, you know, and I encountered one full aimbot or headshots, hundreds of kills in the beta. Maybe one suspect player that sort of beamed me across the map, or headshots, and I was like, that's kind of weird, you know. So let's just say, to be safe, let's say 2 cheaters in 8 days of playing quite a lot. I'd say that's a win. That's a win. I'm very happy about it. You know, 1, maybe 2 cheater in 8 days, I'd say is fantastic and absolutely brilliant in comparison to Battlefield 5. If you played Battlefield 5 on PC in a certain period of time, it was every game, multiple cheaters, and every game, every day, multiple cheaters, pretty much unplayable. So I'm very happy to say I didn't see a lot of them, which is great. The sweet spot sniper visual identifier, you see it immediately, and you know that you're in that sniper's sweet spot range. I think that's really good. So you know you're in there, so you're like, bam, I gotta get behind cover, you know. The only criticism, I said, just shrink it a little bit, make it a bit smaller. It's very, very large and very in your face, I would say, in a minute. But I mean, that's only. Generally, I quite like it, the visual identifier, but just make it a bit smaller. Another thing I mentioned I quite like is you can be able to shoot the medic bags to stop healing. I think this will be a strat you'll see more often as the game goes into launch and the game evolves. I quite like it, and I think a lot of good players would do that. When they're shooting someone, they're trying to push someone, they'll shoot the bag and then push them. I think that'd be a strat that would be used quite a lot, I think. I quite like it. Another thing about the medic bag, you know, you can sort of throw it down and then sort of go around the corner and heal behind cover. Because you're still in the circle, the range circle of the medic bag, so sometimes enemies might not know that you're there. And you can sort of, at certain points where I was sort of luring players in for like easy kills, and you know, and I was sort of healing, and so I sort of quite like how that gameplay plays there. But like I said, but like I said before, you know, as the game evolves, I think you might not be able to get away with that if like good players shoot in the ammo box and stuff like that. But I quite like that, how that sort of, you can put it down and then get healed from a different area. Do you know what I mean? I quite like how that played. The soldier cam, so when you want to spawn on your... Something else I liked, probably the final point, because I think this video's too long, I think. The soldier cam in the bottom right, to see whether it's safe or not. I think it was in like Battlefield 4. I really like that, and something to think about as well before you spawn in on your teammates, from my experience, is see what they're up to, see what they're doing before you spawn in. And I really like that feature. And I think that's all I'm going to mention. And I think, you know, I think this game, like I said before at the sort of start of the video, I think this beta has been very solid. PC for performance, well, I've had no crashes, it's very stable. I think there's some good foundations here for a good game. As I said before, I'd like to see how it continues. I do feel it has potential. Like I said, it's not perfect. There's some problems, like I mentioned before. That's why you make a video like this, to get the problems out there, and you know, we want the best game that this game can be. You know, I think that's the point of making these videos. There's a lot of stuff that I quite like in this game, and yeah, and just like sort of closing thoughts. I kind of felt sad that it was over Battlefield 6, and I would like to sort of play more. I'm eager to play more. I want to see the other maps. I want to see the more weapons. Looking forward to launch. I'm sorry if this is a long one to get through. A lot of concerns for improvements, I think, to get through, and I think hopefully let me know. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to launch. Thank you for watching. I'll see you boys in the next one.